This is one of the craziest crime events I've ever heard. On a cold morning in February 7th, 2025, a routine task at Memorial Mortuary and Crematory in southwest Houston, Texas. It became the kind of story the city's mortuary workers whisper about for years. The sort of incident that strips away the comforting rituals that surround death and replaces them with something raw and grotesque. The person at the center of that break in trust was Paige Laudermilk, a 34-year-old licensed embalmer employed at the facility. Within weeks, the incident had rippled through funeral service regulators, law enforcement, and the national press. The deceased was Charles Roy Rodriguez, 58, who had died of natural causes in January. Rodriguez's name and past appear repeatedly in the public record because he was listed on the Texas Sex Offender Registry, a fact that would later figure prominently in investigators' accounts and in the tangled moral questions surrounding the case. What investigators allege reads like a scene from a horror film. According to the affidavit and witness statements released by authorities during the preparation of Rodriguez's body on February 7, 2025, Laudermilk allegedly used a scalpel to stab the man in the groin area, cut off his penis, and then placed it inside his mouth before the body was cremated. The act was allegedly witnessed by an embalming student and at least one other employee. When confronted, the affidavit says, Laudermilk told a trainee, "You didn't see anything," and allegedly threatened other staff members to keep silent. The first ethical rupture was practical. Mortuary work depends on a compact of professionalism, respect, and trust. Families hand over the bodies of loved ones, expecting competence and dignity. For the funeral director, who later discovered the mutilation, the shock was twofold. The physical mutilation itself and the realization that a co-worker had betrayed the trust of grieving families and the legal responsibilities that accompany handling the dead. The Texas Funeral Service Commission moved quickly. Laudermilk's embalmer license was suspended pending investigation. News of the alleged mutilation triggered immediate condemnation from law enforcement officials and from members of the medical and funeral communities. Harris County Precinct 1 Constable Alan Rosen, who has spoken publicly about the case, repeatedly emphasized that legality and human decency require the dead to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they were in life. No matter what one thinks of his life, the law requires that he be treated with dignity in death, Rosen told reporters. Prosecutors described the incident as vicious and brutal, and the case was classified as felony abuse of a corpse, a Texas state jail felony that carries possible jail time and fines. The human details behind the headlines make the story stick with you. Prosecutors say that co-workers were terrified, not just by what they saw, but because they claimed they were threatened into silence. One embalming student, still early in a career that requires both technical skill and cool nerves, found herself in the position of witnessing something morally abhorrent and then being pressured to look the other way. That dynamic, fear plus silence, is one reason the case did not appear in the public record immediately. According to reports, the funeral director filed a complaint with the Texas Funeral Service Commission after staff finally reported what had happened. Laudermilk surrendered to authorities in March and was booked into custody. Her bond was set at $5,000 and she was released pending the court process. At the arraignment and in subsequent coverage, images of courtrooms, official statements, and steps taken by regulators underscored how swiftly a local mortuary incident had become a legal and regulatory matter with statewide attention. Memorial Mortuary's parent company announced steps to retrain staff and cooperated with investigators as the case unfolded. Public reaction was a mix of revulsion, curiosity, and a debate about motive. Some outlets and commenters pointed to Rodriguez's past as a registered sex offender and speculated on whether anger or vigilante impulses motivated the alleged mutilation. Others, including legal and ethical commentators, insisted that personal feelings about the deceased cannot justify criminal activity and that the rule of law exists precisely to prevent people from taking retribution into their own hands, especially when the dead cannot defend themselves. Law enforcement emphasized that the criminal statute protects the dead and the public interest beyond the identities of those deceased. Beyond the immediate legal ramifications, the case exposed vulnerabilities in a trade that rarely makes headlines. Mortuary staff regularly handle delicate work, embalming, restorative efforts, and preparation for funeral services, often with little public scrutiny. The Texas Funeral Service Commission's rapid suspension of Laudermilk's license and opening of an administrative review was intended both to address this specific incident and to reassure the public that professional standards would be enforced. For the families of those served by the facility, the scandal prompted new and painful questions. Was everybody in safe hands? Were procedures and oversight sufficient? There are also quieter echoes of this event. Portraits of the workers who were left to pick up the pieces, the funeral director who found the mutilation, the other embalmer or trainee pressed into silence, the administrative staff balancing calls from grieving relatives with the demands of investigators and regulators, and the broader community of funeral professionals whose work depends on mutual trust. For all, the incident was an unwelcome rupture, a reminder that even the systems we trust to manage the final passage of life are staffed by fallible people. As the case moved toward court dates, legal documents and witness statements became central to the public record. Prosecutors indicated evidence included witness statements and other collected materials from the mortuary. Defense strategy and motives were still being hashed out in filings and hearings. At the time of reporting, Laudermilk faced the abuse of a corpse charge and potential administrative sanctions. The criminal process, with discovery, possible plea talks, or trial, would determine criminal culpability and sentencing possibilities. In the end, the morgue horror is less about lurid details and more about what happens when societies fail to maintain basic decency. Even for those we dislike, the law steps in as a corrective. Regulators suspend licenses to protect the public, and communities that expected dignity for their dead are forced to reckon with betrayal. For Memorial Mortuary, for the staff who witnessed the act, and for the family members of the deceased, the incident left a stain that the courtroom alone may not fully clean the society. It has to be a collective effort to obey the law so we can have a decent environment to live in. This brings me to another question. Why does Mortuary never get filled up, no matter how big or small the size is? It can operate for many years and people are being buried in there almost every week. But it never gets filled up. What is the mystery behind it? Kindly subscribe to my channel and comment your opinion about this story. Do you think she had a personal problem with the deceased when he was alive, or she was naturally being unprofessional? Also, if you know any mortuary that actually filled up without space to accommodate any more dead bodies for burial, please let me know at the comment section. Thank you.